The legend is set on Halloween night in 1962 in a quintessential small American town, the kind of place where everyone knows each other. Here, a group of high school students gathered for a party at the home of a girl named Maria, and the atmosphere is one of typical high school parties. There's youthful rebellion, there's excitement. Maria's father is conveniently out of town. A key detail that grounds the story in this specific place are the costumes. This was in an era before mass-produced costumes, and the partygoers are all wearing homemade masks crafted from common materials like plaster, burlap, and paper mache. This detail becomes crucial to the story's visual horror. A teenager named Tommy, who had his new Polaroid camera with a flash, asks everyone to gather for a group picture. As the masked teenagers pile together, an unknown figure is captured among them. This individual is wearing a black executioner-style hood, and he had gone unnoticed during the chaos of the party. The photograph becomes the legend's, the chilling, tangible proof of the killer's presence among the victims before the violence began. This is the story of the 1962 Halloween Massacre urban legend. Let's get spooky. Hey, spooky people, it's your best friend Kenny, and we are back with another spooky, disturbing story. Before we get to today's story, let's make sure that you are subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Please make sure that you like and share this video. Of course, the unknown figure in the black hood ends up being the killer, and the horror of the legend is amplified by the killer's approach. Before initiating the attack, the hooded figure secured the house, turning the place of party into an inescapable trap. The story describes how the killer props a heavy porch chair under a front doorknob and quietly places wooden dowel rods in the window tracks, preventing them from being open. The violence begins in a secluded part of the house. Maria and Tommy are found in the bedroom, and their throats are cut. They're discovered by another partygoer, Karen, and this is the moment that the party turns into massive panic. As the screams are up, the trapped teenagers rush for the exits, only to find them jammed and blocked. The house descends into chaos, and the hooded figure moves through the panicked crowd with terrifying proficiency. The story emphasizes the killer's dispassionate and expert use of a knife, gutting and stabbing victims with efficiency that some versions of the tale liken to the skills of a farmhand familiar with butchering animals. The final death toll of most common versions of the urban legend is 7. After the slaughter, the killer makes a calm escape through a single window that had been intentionally left unsecured, vanishing into the night. The legend ends with law enforcement arriving at the scene of the unimaginable carnage. The only clues left behind are the bodies, Tommy's Polaroid photos that captured the killer's image, and the executioner mask itself. The killer is never identified, and the motive for the massacre remains a mystery. This open-ended ending is a major part of the legend's power, leaving the reader with the sense of an unresolved dread and cementing the 1962 Halloween Massacre as a chilling, unsolved case in the annals of digital folklore. The story structure is a carefully constructed example of a creepypasta. This is the genre of online horror that relies on specific, recurring tropes to maximize its psychological impact and make it go viral. Including a cursed piece of media, in this case a Polaroid, is a classic element, echoing the haunting video cassette in The Ring or the photoshopped images that became part of the Slender Man universe. The antagonist is an enigmatic, often silent, and seemingly unstoppable figure whose motives are never explained. And finally, the unsolved ending ensures that the story can't be neatly filed away. It lingers, inviting speculation and ensuring continued spread. The story is a folktale born of the internet. It's optimized for the very platforms that it spreads on. At the heart of the 1962 Halloween Massacre urban legend is this single powerful photograph. The narrative, with all of its gruesome detail, was created to provide a backstory for a photograph that is inherently unsettling on its own. This picture stems from a unique historical context, photographic technology, and the psychological impact of viewing the past through a lens that doesn't have the right context. In the mid-20th century, Halloween was different from the commercially driven holiday of today. Costumes were rarely store-bought replicas of movie characters. Instead, they were often homemade creations made with household materials and imagination. Masks were made with paper mache, plaster, cloth sacks, and simple fabrics, resulting in expressions that were abstract and unintentionally terrifying. Vintage pictures from this era are filled with figures hidden behind crude, oversized doll heads, distorted animal faces, and black minimalistic clown masks. To our eye, used to seeing horror villains and superhero costumes, these creations are profoundly disturbing. They lack cultural reference points, and they make them appear uncanny and menacing. The unnerving quality of these vintage Halloween photos is amplified by the photographic medium of the time. The images were typically rendered in high contrast black and white or in faded, distorted color palettes of early colored film. The grain of the film stock is often visible, adding a layer of texture that feels raw and unpolished. And the use of primitive on-camera flashes produce a harsh, direct light that flattens features, bleaches out details, and casts deep, stark shadows. This combination of factors creates what's termed as an aesthetic of analog decay. The process strips the subjects of their humanity and warmth, transforming a lively scene of children or teenagers at a party into a silent, ghostly image. The people in the photograph cease to be relatable individuals and instead become eerie artifacts from a remote past. The imperfections of the medium, the grain, the fading, the harsh light, become an integral part of the aesthetic, suggesting a world that is not only old, but unsettling. When it appears on a social media feed or on a horror subreddit, it's a strange image, divorced from its original time, place, and purpose. It's almost certainly an innocent snapshot from a real Halloween gathering in the 1960s, capturing a moment of fun. However, removed from that context, the viewer is left with only the unsettling visuals, the crude masks, the dark room, and the flash photography. The fact that the photo is strange allows the narrative of the massacre to rush in to fill. The image becomes a blank screen onto which audiences can project their fears about home invasion, hidden identities, and the potential for violence to erupt from a festive facade. And this reveals the fundamental principle of modern myth-making. The story is explained for the photograph. The image functions as a meme object, an artifact whose inherent aesthetic power and ambiguity make it a perfect seed for creating a story. A visually engaging but unexplained image provokes a creative response from the online community, which then reverse engineers a story to account for the feelings of dread or mystery the image evokes. The 1962 Halloween Massacre is a classic example of this process, where the perceived creepiness of the photograph demanded a horrific backstory, and the internet was happy to make one. The transformation of the 1962 Halloween Massacre from a niche scary story into a widely recognized urban legend is an example of the mechanics of digital folklore. It traveled predictably, moving from specialized communities online to mainstream platforms like Facebook and Instagram. It was amplified and mutated at each stage. Like many digital trends, the 1962 Halloween Massacre almost certainly found its footing in online spaces dedicated to horror. Platforms like Reddit, with its specialized subreddits like r/creepy, r/no-sleep, and r/urban legends, are an ideal incubator for these types of stories. In these communities, users share and create scary stories, often accompanied with unsettling images. The format, a striking photo paired with a block of narrative text, is perfect for this environment. And within these subcultures, the line between fiction and fact is intentionally blurred. The stories are presented as real accounts or unsolved mysteries, and the community engages with them as a form of interactive storytelling or a modern ghost story session. In this fertile ground, this image and its story were likely paired and refined. Mainstream social media platforms acted as an accelerant for this story. The legend achieved mass visibility when it found its way on Facebook, Tumblr, and later Instagram and Twitter. The core components of the legend, the eerie vintage photograph and the short, terrifying narrative, are perfectly optimized for the shareable content model of these platforms. The visual hook of the photo stops the user from scrolling, and the concise, shocking story is easily digestible and impactful. The migration into mainstream platforms is a big step in the lifestyle of an urban legend. It exposes the story to a broader audience, many of whom are not familiar with the conventions of creepypasta or the fictional nature of content from horror forums. Not knowing these things, a casual user is more likely to accept the story at its face value, or at the very least, share it with a caption like, "Is this real?" This ambiguity fuels further circulation, as each share introduces the legend to new potential believers. The story then made its way to content aggregators and video creators. Websites that compile lists of creepy unsolved mysteries or terrifying vintage photos frequently include the 1962 Halloween Massacre, often presenting it with little or no fact-checking. Creators on YouTube produce videos that narrate the story in dramatic fashion, sometimes adding spooky music and visual effects. And this is significant because it packages the legend in a format typically associated with documentary or news analysis. The act of media production lends the story a veneer of legitimacy and authority that it would not otherwise have. As with any piece of folklore, especially internet folklore, the story of the 1962 Halloween Massacre mutated as it spread. The core elements remain consistent: the party, the photo, the hooded killer, the 7 victims, but the details vary. Some versions are brief and to the point, designed for maximum impact in a short social media post. Others are elaborate, adding names and characters and descriptions of the violence. The most significant addition to this story came with the development of the 2023 horror film, which introduced its own contradictory timeline. The story spread virally, even though it had the opportunity to be debunked immediately. It shows a key characteristic of how information flows online. The truth value of a piece of content is often secondary to the story that it tells, the story's efficiency and the story's emotional resonance. People even acknowledge that even if the story is false, it remains a good story. People share the 1962 Halloween Massacre because it's a compelling story, not because it's true. It taps into the primal fears of home invasion and the uncanny, and it aligns with the spooky atmosphere of the Halloween season. The act of sharing becomes a performative participation in a cultural tradition. This urban legend is measured by its ability to provoke a reaction and compel a user to click share. The story of the 1962 Halloween Massacre is a great story, but the event never occurred. The legend is a complete fabrication, a modern ghost story born of an eerie photograph and a creative imagination, or imaginations. The most direct evidence that this legend is a legend comes from the established fact-checking organizations that specialize in investigating viral claims and urban legends. Snopes has thoroughly investigated the 1962 Halloween Massacre and has definitively characterized it as false. Their research confirms that there are no credible reports to substantiate the story of a mass murder at a Halloween party in 1962. This is a thorough debunking of the story. The slaughter of 7 teenagers in a small town would have generated significant widespread media coverage at both the local and national levels. However, exhaustive searches of newspaper archives, police records, and other historical documents from 1962 and the surrounding years yield no mention of such an incident in the United States. The story only exists on the internet, and there's no corroborating evidence from the time it was alleged to have happened. It's important to note that when the phrase Halloween Massacre appears in historical context, it refers to events entirely unrelated to the urban legend. This include a 1992 armed political conflict in Angola and a major reorganization of President General Ford's cabinet in 1975. The legend has co-opted the dramatic name that has real-world historical significance, further muddying the waters for those who attempt to verify the story by Googling it. Even without fact-checking, the story's logic begins to crumble when you examine it. The narrative contains several significant plot holes and inconsistencies, many of which have been pointed out by skeptical users in the very online forums where the story spreads. For example, the locked door. The story claims the killer locked the doors from the outside in a way that prevented escape. Short of using an external padlock, it's difficult to imagine how this could be accomplished in a way that would thwart a house full of panicked people. A central clue in the legend is the killer's mask, supposedly found on a roadside link to the crime. In some versions of the story, the discovery happens years later. The idea that a simple cloth mask, exposed to the elements, could be a definitive link to a specific murder scene in an era decades before the advent of modern DNA analysis is improbable. The 1962 Halloween Massacre fits within a well-established subgenre of digital horror, the horror story based on decontextualized or a manipulated photograph. Another great example of this is the urban legend of the Buckley family, which tells the story of 2 children who murdered their mother on Halloween, often accompanied by a gruesome photo of them holding her severed head. Fact-checkers have confirmed that this image is a digital alteration of an ordinary antique family portrait created by an artist specializing in spooky art. Both the Buckley story and the 1962 legend operate on the same principle. They take a vintage photograph, which already has an eerie quality to it, and it attaches a horrific fabricated backstory. While the 1962 Halloween Massacre is a work of fiction. Its central theme, the horrific confusion of real violence with festive make-believe, has a parallel in a real-life crime. 5 years after the fictional massacre was said to have occurred, a murder took place at a Halloween party in Southern California that embodied this very terror. Though distinct from the urban legend, the 1967 murder of Kenneth Lindström provides a fascinating example of how real events can inform and lend an unearned plausibility to folklore. On the night of October 29, 1967, over 50 guests gathered for a Halloween costume party at the Valley Country Club Apartments in Van Nuys, California. Among the attendees were Kenneth Lindström, a 32-year-old business directory publisher, and Jack Gentry Stearns, a 35-year-old automobile salesman. Neither man was wearing a costume. As the party continued past midnight, witnesses reported that Stearns became increasingly agitated after observing Lindström dancing closely with his 22-year-old wife, Maria. Shortly after 1 a.m., Stearns confronted Lindström in the apartment building's lobby. Without warning, Stearns produced a .38 caliber revolver and shot Lindström, killing him. Stearns was arrested nearly 2 years later, in April 1969, after a complex investigation clouded by conflicting witness testimonies. At trial, he claimed Lindström was a victim of an underworld gang hit, but the prosecution successfully argued that the motive was a simple, tragic fit of jealousy. Stearns was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The most remarkable aspect of the Lindström murder, and the part that echoes with the 1962 legend, was the immediate reaction of the partygoer. In the chaotic moments after the gunshot, the costume guests did not recognize the act as real violence. Instead, they assumed it was an elaborate Halloween prank or a piece of morbid theater designed to scare them. People were so confused that one woman who was dressed in a hula suit began to dance over Lindström's falling body, playfully saying this will wake him up. It was only when she saw this spreading pool of blood that the horrific reality set in, and she shouted, "This is no gag, he's hurt." The final stage of the life cycle of a successful piece of digital folklore is becoming a commodity. And for the 1962 Halloween Massacre, this occurred in 2023 with the release of the low-budget horror film that capitalized on the legend's name and recognition. The film was titled 1962 Halloween Massacre. It was directed by Crawford Watson, and the movie was marketed directly to fans of the urban legend. However, the story is different from the established folklore. Instead of a large party at a suburban home, the movie follows a group of lifelong best friends who travel to a remote cottage on Halloween night where they are attacked. The change in setting and scenario is a common trope in the slasher genre, indicating that the filmmakers were leveraging the familiar structure of films like Friday the 13th or The Evil Dead. The adaptation is not a faithful retelling of the urban legend, but it's using the legend's evocative title and core aesthetic onto a standard horror movie template. The movie, the 1962 Halloween Massacre, became a brand to be exploited. The journey of the 1962 Halloween Massacre urban legend, from its beginnings as an ambiguous photograph to its ultimate commodification as a feature film, shows how myths are born, disseminated, and monetized in the internet age. The enduring appeal of the 1962 Halloween Massacre is rooted in deep-seated psychological fears that the internet is uniquely positioned to exploit. Halloween itself is a holiday predicated on the thrill of blurring the line between the real and the unreal. material, making it a perfect ground for stories where that line is erased. The legend taps into primal fears of home invasion, the hidden malevolence of strangers, and the unsettling notion that the past holds dark, forgotten secrets. The digital platforms where the story thrives contribute to its power. Social media feeds flatten context, presenting a fabricated story from a horror blog with the same visual weight as a news report from a reputable source. This environment erodes the distinction between fact and fiction, making audiences more susceptible to believing compelling narratives, especially when they are accompanied by seemingly authentic photographic evidence. The instant accessibility of eerie vintage imagery, taken from its original context, provides an endless supply of raw material for the creation of new myths that feel ancient and immediate. The Halloween Massacre in 1962 is just a scary story. That's all it is. But it shows how our interconnected digital environment has become the most powerful engine for the creation, evolution, and dissemination of scary stories in order to keep us up at night as we're doom scrolling. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel, The Spooky Lawyer. Make sure that you click like and share this video. Follow me on Blue Sky, Twitter, and TikTok. My username is The Spooky Lawyer. If there is a spooky or disturbing story you would like me to cover, leave a comment and tell me about it. Or if you like the story, leave a comment and tell me about it. Or if you're feeling shy, send me an email. My email address is thespookylawyer@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the channel, there is a link in the description of this video to buy me a coffee, so you can buy me a coffee. Or you can become a member of this channel. For the $1.99 tier, you can get access to exclusive content, including exclusive videos, and access to my videos before they are posted publicly. Thank you for considering this. I'm going to put the names of everyone who has donated to this channel here, and I'm going to put the names of everyone who is a member of this channel here. You also support me by liking my videos, sharing my videos, and watching my videos. And I really appreciate you watching my videos. And please stay spooky.